Tonight's guest is Solaris BlueRaven. She is a published author, producer, writer, editor, and public speaker with a professional background in covert technology, surveillance, investigative research, healing modalities, and technology. She is known for her experience as a test pilot for synthetic telepathy, black projects, of which she discloses in her book series, Eye of the Remote. She is a world-class psychic, clairvoyant, remote viewer, and systems buster for MK Ultra related programs. Ms. BlueRaven also hosts 2 radio shows, Raven Star's Witching Hour each Saturday night, midnight Eastern, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. She also hosts Hyperspace on Secor Radio, digital radio network each Friday at midnight Eastern and 9 p.m. Pacific. I'll post those links for you to get to both of those sites on our social media. In the meantime, I want to welcome Solaris to SpaceboyUniverse.
Well, hello there. Good evening.
Yes.
Hey.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes, well, it's a treat, and we can't thank you enough to hang your hat at our house tonight, and I'm sure it's going to be interesting.
It certainly will, and it's a pleasure to be here. So thanks again for inviting me.
Great. Real quick before the show started, I do my rundown of looking at Facebook and all that good stuff. And there were a couple of items that I had mentioned on Facebook and saved. And one real quick one, and we can talk about this through the course of the night because I know Surlana has many questions, is I wanted to address at some point the hip-hop producer Timberland, who has this sub-pack that allows you to play this music all through your body. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that post?
Right, yeah, and I actually made a comment that they can do that through covert technologies. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So, at some point we'll probably address that too, and I know Surlana wants to address another issue.
Before we get into your story, there's like some current events we want to get your take on.
Would you like to go ahead and bring up the GPS one?
Yeah, I wanted to get your take, since you're familiar with all the EMF stuff, of what the event that has happened on June 9th and the event that's planned for June 21st, 23rd, 28th, and the 30th, where our military is testing at China Lake Naval Weapons Center that will cause an outage of GPS down to 50 feet above the ground and at a radius of 253 nautical miles in the LA Basin, the Bay Area, and Las Vegas.
Right. I saw that article too, and I think Tina Marie was looking at that as well. But from what I look at, it seems to me like they're running a test insofar as scrambling and running interference to see if they can access certain things on a technological scale. Now, also, what comes to mind, because of where I've been with the covert technology and how it neurally interfaces me, is that they can actually use that technology, if they were wise, to disrupt any signals that are attacking people, civilians, and actually run interference to scramble and disengage attacks against people in general neurologically. So that's one thing I'm looking at. But another thing I'm looking at, yes, they can pretty much remotely disable anything technologically. So that's the whole idea behind our military. I don't have to tell you all this. It's really about the weaponization of technology and what they can do insofar as disrupting, scrambling, interfering, and that sort of thing.
Cool.
Okay, so you don't know, your take is if it's legit research to protect us or actually exploit us?
I think it's both. I think that they are looking at adversaries like China, probably running interference with types of technologies that can literally disable our planes and disable other areas, and they're probably running an interference program. I suspect it goes in both directions. That's just my own hit on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right.
I figured she'd have an opinion.
Well,
yep.
Cool. So where do we begin this magical mystery tour, Surlana?
We were lucky enough to receive your copy of your DVD, and we watched that today, and I took notes, and I just kind of would look over at Spaceboy, and my jaw would drop, and we'd pause the DVD, and we'd say, this sounds like da-da-da-da, and later in the video, we would see an image of what we were talking about, because we started talking about, this seems like it goes back to the Tesla Tower, when he was doing all those experiments, and then he yanked it, because he was worried about how it could be used from a military standpoint.
Right. Yeah. It's a good point you make right there. Well, he was a brilliant genius, and in my opinion had great access to what I would call off-world technologies and information. So, yeah, a lot of the artificial telepathy, synthetic telepathy, it's basically just hijacking the neural centers and your natural psychic telepathic ability, which everybody has, and then interfacing onto an artificial intelligence program, which is a supercomputer driving system. It's really not super complex. There are patents about this. There are actually military applications, and the military has contracted with synthetic telepathy, as I mentioned in the documentary as well.
Yes, see, now, from starting at the most basic level, my poor little liberal arts major mind can't get around the science of it and the math about, and I know it makes sense that we have brain waves and we give off frequencies and things like that, but beyond that, I can't. It's difficult for me to comprehend. It's not that I'm saying I don't believe. It's just that I really mentally can't comprehend it.
It is a lot when your story is.
I don't understand physics, and
it's a wealth. It's
a lot of information.
It's a wealth of information.
It's a lot of information that basically you need to, for anybody who's interested in this sort of thing, you have to roll up your sleeves and do the investigative work. I mean, really roll up your sleeves and look at the patents, look at the technology, look at all the contracts the military has, DARPA has, and then start understanding. I broke it down as simple as I could, and I know it's not simple, but from my way of decoding things, I'm very clear on how they inducted me and the technology they used, plus the way they map the electromagnetic field. And as I touched on, we are electrical, which means we can be hijacked remotely. So that's the one thing. Yeah, basically, just take it down to the simple equation. You're an electrical conduit. You're a transmitter and a receiver naturally. You have a supercomputer brain, which is a driving system. Even if you don't use 100% of it, it's still a supercomputer. It has conscious design. It has a connection to source. It's a multiversal design. All they have to do is map your electromagnetic field remotely. Now, this is done by satellite. Interface you onto an artificial intelligence array system, which is supercomputer driving systems, with a live handler real time, which is what they did with me in 2004, and the game rolls on. It's really not that complex, but you will get it. I guarantee you'll understand this. There's a book called, let me see here, there's Dr. Robert Duncan, who puts out Project Soulcatcher Volume 2. For people who want to know more about this technology, he just breaks it all down for you. There are patents that he shows. He also is one of the original developers of some of the psychotronic hardware. And I met with him, and we did an expert presentation at the Mind Control Super Soldier Summit. So, this is real. This is not foo-foo, woo-woo stuff. This is the real deal.
No doubt, because like you said, when I ever hear words like DARPA, I automatically think, oh my goodness, what are we? I think of, I hate to say it, more sinister or more dark, black projects, if you will.
Right.
Ultra black. Yeah, the things that that kind of give me make the hair on the back of my neck stand up. So
right. Yeah, well, it's all weaponization. They were really big on AI, as you know, and robotics. But, of course, what they show you is only the tip of the iceberg, because what they have in the black technologies department is way beyond all that.
Right. I mean, I always take a stance that when I do see, well, that's great, they've made a walking upright robot, and I can only assume what other compartmentalized department has worked up to plug into that, and so I agree with you. You don't know until what's underneath the water on a big iceberg.
Yeah, or if you get pulled into these programs, then you're kind of forced to decode them like I was. So I had a normal life before this.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. So how did you get pulled into this? You said now, because you're clairvoyant psychic, maybe you've got like a louder frequency that can be picked up over just a regular person who doesn't have any intuitive abilities like this. Were you targeted because of that? It's just something you picked up by accident, or did they know about you? Or
well, it's one of my abilities, and so far as my capability, I know at the time I was inducted, and I go through this in my book, and I also go through it, I think, in my documentary. But I have a Merkaba, what we call Merkaba signal. I've worked a lot with DNA activation and natural healing before I was pulled into the program. And what happens is you get to levels of light body and frequency where you keep radiating more and more frequencies in multidimensional space until you receive this kind of a Merkaba signal. And when the Merkaba signal is a natural signal and harmonic that resonates with a universal, what we call the universal celestial heartbeat and pulse. I know this sounds esoteric, but that's my benchmark of who I am as a multidimensional being. Now, that doesn't even include my martial arts background as a second-degree black belt instructor when they pulled me in. I was a candidate for a lot of the technology, but really, when I look back at why these guys did this in this high-profile band, I'm pretty sure it was for experimentation and also for their own entertainment. They did a lot of insidious programs with me. They used me for a sci-spy. They pretty much ran me through programs that were designed for a person who was working covert intel, because my handler, who was working with Neil, who was also a handler, literally has access to this and is one of those types of beings. So, it's just a matter of being programmed into these projects and literally being pulled through an array of a lot of different technology.
Were they trying to bring you in kind of like as one of these super soldiers? Because it sounded like you had a physical strength, your martial arts, and you had the mental ability too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting because they tried so hard to break me down, and I wouldn't break. Although I was traumatized, because I can tell you, when you get hit with these technological feeds, when you get interfaced with this technology and your live handler, your body goes into shock. And that's the one thing I like to tell people, you have no idea what this feels like. Sometimes it feels like you're getting shot out of a cannon, and other times your vitals start to drop, because what happened to me is that everything was dropping. And they rebooted me through the AI programs. In other words, I was kind of rebirthed in this project. It's really strange. And then, of course, that the live handler is still there to be there. And it's interesting how they relay the programming, because they'll try to, there'll be good cop, bad cop programming too. Right. So, but it didn't work. I mean, the only thing the programs can work, but I couldn't comply with their evil. And in my opinion, I think it's insidious. Some of the things that they did was just plain wrong.
Well, it sounds just like the MK Ultra, where, they used a mental and physical abuse to break, I guess, you break them down mentally, where you get to this point where I guess maybe you're in a zombie-like state and you'll do anything just to, I don't know, survive, or I don't know what it takes to get to that point where you're controllable.
Right. Well, it's usually trauma-based mind control. The old days, they used to pull you into a room and torture you with electricity and drugs and, whatever they could do, sexual, whatever they could do. They'll hurt you. Nowadays, they can remotely tap into you and literally run these programs. They don't have to be there in person, but they are there live feed real time. There is a real person there. They're just remote. And sometimes it can be the artificial intelligence array system. But I was initially pulled in by live feed real time. But the trauma comes from just being constantly banged up, electromagnetically, because what they did to me was just, push, 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 push. And the interesting thing is I had to back them up telepathically, because every time I would write a sentence or I'd communicate loud or telepathically naturally, they would just slam me back, and then I'd have to box my way out of it through the telepathy live feed real time. Wow. So I got to talking super fast, and people used to give me a hard time about that and say, why does she talk so fast? Well, I normally talk fast, but I really sped up when I was engaged with these guys.
And get it out before somebody takes it from you.
Yeah,
exactly.
I've always said that that was, for me, I've always enjoyed to hear you talk, because to me it's like in fact today, as an example, Surlana and I were talking, and I'm like saying, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this.
And I'm like, would you please chill out? My goodness.
And it's kind of like, I can relate to somebody that can verbally keep up to that level, and you're definitely one of those. And of course, now when we were watching the video, I got kind of concerned, because in the video, you were definitely in a different gear altogether. I mean, and so I tell you what, why don't we take our break? And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this. So we're at the bottom of our hour break. So hang tight, take a little beverage, just sip there, and when we return, we'll have